Hello! Welcome to today's episode of Symposium. I'm Amber Sheldon.
I am Maritza Punch.
And I'm Caroline Wall.
Caroline is also getting her PhD at BU. She is a PhD candidate working on her dissertation, and today we're just going to talk about how did you become interested in your topic, what drew you to this particular thesis, and what has your journey been in the PhD?
We'll take it. Well, thanks so much for having me. So I came in thinking that I was going to work on Nietzsche. I ended up, my current advisor is Paul Katsafanis, and I came here to work with him on Nietzsche stuff. But I found, as I kept working on it, that the pieces of Nietzsche's philosophy that most interested me were his views on ethics and value theory, especially. So for my dissertation, I've ended up sort of zeroing in on contemporary discussions of values and how values connect to ethics. So my dissertation is on sort of individualist, naturalist accounts of values and virtues and how those two things go together.
Great, yeah, so to give like an example, I guess from a presentation you gave during our class, you talked about ethical personalism. Could you like expand upon what that view is and how it relates to your research topic?
Yeah, sure thing. So one view that I came across as I've been kind of developing the dissertation project is from these 20th century phenomenologists called the ethical personalists. So Max Scheler and Edith Stein are the two who I focus on more. So I have a reading that's, I don't know, out there, but also not unanimously agreed upon or anything. But the reading of their work is basically saying that each person has a value hierarchy that is particular to them. So insofar as Amber is Amber and Merva is Merva, each of them has a set of values that stand in a certain relation to each other that is particular to them. So we may all have like a lot of values shared in common. So personalists would say that all of us should agree that murder is bad. That should be something that belongs to all of our value hierarchies. And it should also probably be the case that murder is worse than stealing a loaf of bread for all of us. But then there's possibility for things to go to differ as soon as we get into the nitty-gritty of each person's value hierarchy.
So suppose that I do not have an inclination to be a mother, but I might aspire to be a kind of person who has those inclinations to be a good mother, but I might not have it yet, but I might be aspiring to have those values. Do they say that this is still particular to me? Do they still think that this is tied to my personal preferences? How do they explain those aspirational values?
No, so this is a good question, and I think that we can like broaden it to just, it seems like in some cases our values change. But what I just said was that, well, for Merva to be Merva, she has to have this set of values, and she has to think that these things matter more than these things. So what's going on when those things change for us? So I think the personalists would use the language of values being revealed to us versus values being concealed from us. So here's what I mean. If right now I have no inclination to be a mother, and I don't, then if it turned out that I became interested in figuring out, well, okay, is there really nothing that motherhood has to offer for me? Or if I become curious about, could I come to value motherhood? What I'm doing is I'm exploring whether or not there's some range of values related to motherhood that could be revealed to me. And so whether that's going to turn out well or not will depend on just facts of the matter that I may not have reliable access to. So it could be the case that I end up having a child, and it goes really well. It becomes like a life-orienting activity, and all of this checks out as authentically mine. So that could be one way things could turn out. It could also be that I have a child and try to convince myself for the rest of my life that this is the sort of life-orienting activity that I should be spending 20 or 30 years on. And I could systematically deceive myself about that for the rest of my life. So I think what the personalists are suggesting is that's what's happening. That's kind of what's at risk or at stake when we're exploring values that don't currently make sense to us, or trying to acquire new ones. Sometimes it can go really well. We can make legitimate acquisitions or legitimately broaden our experience. But it could also be the case that we don't. We falsify things, and even this systematic self-deception about motherhood could get in the way of me spending my time on things that would actually be authentically valuable for me.
I think what I'm curious still is like, to what extent we can still explain my valuing with my personal preferences, because like maybe I'm imagining more like transformative experience where I couldn't really foresee that I could have adopted some kind of value, but say after a transformative experience, let's think about it as like a traumatic experience where I found myself where I have to take care of a child, for example, and I just want to aspire to value it because I see that it is objectively valuable, even though I have no dispositions, inclinations, or have no prior preferences to come to value it. So, like, do you think that the personalist account could still say that, like, oh, it's a value that is revealed to me? If this is what they are saying, I think they are missing an important distinction between the things I value because I had already inclinations and the things I came to value because I see that it is objectively valuable and I wanted to completely change myself to come to value it.
So first of all, I think that the personalist would want to use that language of revelation to talk about these kinds of transformative experiences. I mean, Edith Stein became like a nun, a Carmelite nun later in her life because she had like a transformative religious experience. But we could describe that in terms of possibilities that existed for you before that point. It could be that you never experienced anything like the value of motherhood or the value of experiencing good opera singing, if we want to use like Callard's aspirational example, which I really like. Certainly from your perspective, these could seem new and radically like disjunctive from the rest of your experiences of values thus far. I think the point that I would like to make with the personalist and also just with the sort of meta-ethical view I've been borrowing from Peter Railton is we can talk about a set of facts about what is possible for you to come to value authentically. And we can say that there's a very big pool of facts that look like that hold for you, and a very big pool that's slightly different that holds for Amber or me. So the fact that you could be able to have that sort of radical evaluative transformation is something that's prescribed by that wider body of hypothetical facts or facts about what's possible for your valuing experience. I think that, yeah, that because of the massive size and like kind of gnarliness of that set of hypothetical facts, like one upshot that we might be a little bothered by is, yeah, there are a lot of mutually incompatible things that could be valuable for you, or that would be valuable for you if you spent time on them, because you can only have one or maybe two careers in a lifetime that you really invest your time into and get the most out of. You can't figure out what the value of being a teacher would be for you, and the value of being a refrigerator repairman, and the value of being like a foster mother or something, and like
an astronaut.
Yeah, we could go on and on. So like my accountant would want to say, there are facts, and you're not going to be able to have all those experiences and grasp all of those facts. But I think what the personalist would want to say, and what I would want to say as a moral perfectionist who's thinking about values in terms of capacities that are good to realize, is that the bigger number of those facts that you can grasp and the greater degree to which you can grasp them is a way of bettering yourself.
Well, now that you mention moral perfectionism, I would like just some more expansion on this concept in relation, I guess, to your overall project, because you introduce it as kind of where it has entered the conversation. So yeah, can we just get some more detail on that view?
Sure, yeah. So my thesis is also involving moral perfectionism as sort of the ethical upshot of this weird value theory stuff that I'm doing. But basically what I want to follow the traditional account in saying that it's better for us to realize more of our capacities to a greater degree. One feature of kind of the perfectionist view is that there's sort of an inexhaustibility to the degree to which we can do this. So we can't really be completionists about, well, I've checked all my boxes, all of my capacities have been exercised today, so I've satisfied my duties and I don't have to think about ethics anymore. It's more of I have to constantly be thinking about what would be better for me to be doing right now? What would be realizing more of my capacities, or realizing them in a better way? If we start to think about values and experiencing values as one kind of capacity along these lines, then we get this ethical mandate to realize more and more of them to a greater and greater degree in our lives. So to try to submit ourselves to new experiences that can reveal those to us.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it would be Aristotelian in such a way, if we thought about our rational capacities. So what other capacities, I guess, are being employed in sort of your value in this value theory?
Right, yeah. So traditional perfectionism does focus more on just these capacities that are related to our use of reason, that also are voluntary. It's not clear that experiencing values is exactly like that. I guess what I would want to say is that I would want to follow someone like Iris Murdoch in saying that there's some sort of activity on our part that's necessary for us to grasp values out in the world, and that can affect the way that we do grasp values. We can direct our attention to one thing over another, or to certain features of something. So if I'm looking at a painting and trying to better appreciate the value of this lovely painting in my life and get a better grasp on the aesthetic value it has to offer me, then if I have a critic who's adequate to the task, or maybe the artist herself to point out, make sure that you're looking at that border right there and how it's a little bit fuzzy, and how this maybe suggests a landscape kind of quality to it. If I'm not attending to the object correctly and someone can help me attend to it better, then we start to see how agency of some kind enters into the picture, even if it's not in terms of doing actions or acting.
And it's are these capacities seem to also be individualized in this way too, that we should almost defer to somebody else's capacity to judge an artwork, perhaps?
Oh, good, yeah. So both the personalists and Peter Railton, who's certainly in the picture for the way I'm thinking about values, want to say that even if we're allowing that there are individual differences in the way we value and the way that we ought to value, very large amounts of our value hierarchies should be shared in common. It would be impossible to make sense of going to see the same movies and then arguing about whether or not they're good afterwards. It would make no sense to argue if we weren't assuming a pretty large degree of similarity there. And then moral disagreements would make no sense as disagreements either. I mean, we have people, like our students, showing up as relativists to the first day of intro ethics, but they don't know. No, but this, I guess, hooks into the overall kind of naturalist account that I'm looking at as a defense of value realism or an account of value realism that allows for this kind of variation. So, basically, someone like Railton is thinking about values and facts about values for me, and facts about the objects that are valuable in this way or that way for me. So if I'm drinking this coffee and I discern that it's delicious, then that fact that the coffee is delicious, first of all, needs to be specified as the coffee is delicious to me. It could be that the coffee is delicious to all people because of features that we all share in common.
I hate coffee.
So maybe not features that you and I share in common. But we want to say that there are properties about me and properties about the coffee that are kind of getting together to make that additional fact that the coffee is tasty. And we can see like physiological bases for taste in this case as kind of the grounding natural facts that would make that hold.
I think I still have a clarificatory question about what the source of value is still. As Amber mentioned, there is this Aristotelian view where we are flourishing by investing in our capacities. But these capacities are more like skills that we develop throughout our lives that might be really specific to me. And there are other kinds of valuable things like morality or like caring about being a good citizen, for example. Then there are some set of things that are intrinsically valuable and that we should all in a way agree on the value of it, even though we do not have capacities to appreciate it.
I think that wouldn't make sense to me if we don't have the capacities to appreciate, for example, like that murder is evil. I think that the view that I'm ascribing to depends on certain assumptions about most people are constituted such that they should be able to recognize that murder is evil. It should have a negative valence for them that outweighs something like the evil of stealing a loaf of bread or of being a bad friend or something. I think that one peculiarity of the view is that I am sort of construing that in terms of the well-being of the subject, and like that's sort of the importance or what it means for murder to be evil, that it's good for me to recognize and to live my life recognizing that murder is evil. And that's kind of the evil making factor about murder. There are facts about murder, facts about me. Meet up here, make it happen. I take your point that a lot of ethicists would not necessarily be happy with that sort of account of like, well, no, murder is evil and that's a fact about murder. Right. You don't need to be in the picture.
Yes.
But I don't know, I mean, I'm sympathetic with Railton's point that, well, what would it mean for like murder to be evil to the universe? Who's to whom?
You might concede that there is this intersubjectively shared like morality that is somehow available to all of us to appreciate it, but I think that is still different from the kinds of things that only I come to personally value. I might come to value playing a piano, playing a good music. And that is relational. Like, I have some capacities to appreciate it, and it is valuable in itself. But then I think there are other kinds of things that are more independently valuable, whether I value it or not. And I think morality or moral actions have a different status than the other things we come to individually value. Like, how does more value realism could make a distinction between two kinds of things?
Yeah, good. So there is this sort of tendency, even for people who want to admit some kind of value individualism on the scene, to say, okay, well, it's the moral values that everyone shares in common exactly the same way. And those are like of overriding importance. And then maybe there are other kind of more trivial values, like what hobby is the best fit for me or something. And so shouldn't we be kind of splicing these two apart? And I would again repeat the point that for both the personalists and for Rilton, a large body of moral facts are going to be shared in common, like quite similarly for each of us, and that's supposed to be because of facts about us that we all share. So like, I don't know, humans are social creatures. Some fact of that sort might ground. Like, therefore, it's just, you're going to have to become a very deformed person, or murder is evil to not hold for you. But putting that aside, one example that I've been thinking about with the latest chapter that I've been writing is about how we might see individual differences in the way that certain moral values are ranked relative to each other. One place that I've been looking is a Reddit forum on dementia for caretakers of people with dementia. I guess the problem on the table that I'm interested in from there is someone with dementia forgets that a loved one of theirs, like a spouse, has passed away and starts asking, like, where is this person? Are they coming to see me? How to respond to that. So there's sort of one group of caretakers who say, well, we think the best thing to do is to tell a therapeutic lie. It's really cruel and unempathetic to insist on dragging this person back to your reality where this person is dead when they're not going to be able to remember that fact. It's going to be disorienting for them. They're going to have to redo the entire grieving process and then forget that they've done it again. So there's just some failure of empathy happening if we insist on being honest in that case. And then there's another set of caretakers who want to say, no, it's really important that people be able to remember that their spouse has died and do what they need to do emotionally in response to that fact. You're sort of denying them, you're alienating them from kind of central facts about their lives and how their lives are going. It's a way of sort of disrespecting them. I find that in those conversations, both sides have a pretty good grasp on what the other moral claims are. So we have these values of respect on the one hand, and kind of honoring the person as still like an agent with a life that's her own, with facts about it that she needs to have some sort of access to. And then also these values of empathy and like really having a rich understanding of what it is like to be a person with dementia and to be in that state of disorientation. What would count as being kind to a person in that state? So I guess I'm interested in explaining a disagreement like that, less in terms of one side is making a mistake that the other is getting right. There are these two values, there is an objective way to rank them, and one party's getting it right and the other party's getting it wrong. I'd like to say something more like, it could be the case that some of the caretakers in one group are constituted such that respect does outrank something like mercy or kindness for them. Like, it just is more important for them. And if they were to be convinced by this other group that they need to tell the therapeutic lie, that could be like very ethically damning for them if they were to act on that basis.
Sure, that's a very helpful example, but I was also thinking about, we can imagine other scenarios where somebody who is doing something, who is violating others' basic rights, let's say, we cannot just like weigh whether those persons' values outweigh the moral reasons. In those cases, we might want to remind them that, hey, these are like objective moral values that we cannot violate.
What I would say there is the moral values hold for them more strongly than whatever other values are in the picture that are making them like murder people or violate other people's rights. They're blind to facts about their own values. They're doing something that's bad for them in behaving like that.
Yeah, because this is just, I've been wondering this whole time, like, what are we morally required to do? Like, in the case of the dementia people, the people who believe in telling the truth, like, being convinced otherwise could be morally damning for them. Are they supposed to act in accordance with the structure of their values and, like, hold this view? Do we have requirements to do certain things?
Yeah. I think that's sort of the upshot. That might be one disturbing consequence of the view too, but a consequence that I think describes the world pretty accurately. Like, I do have a pull on me if I am structured so that I should be paying more attention to respect than to kindness or something. I'm worse off if I'm not sort of answering that call. And it could be the case that we're blind and deaf to those calls like most of the time. And it's difficult to tell, am I responding to facts that are actually true about me and hold about me that I should rank respect in this way relative to mercy? Or am I acting based on like a delusion or a misunderstanding of the values at hand that I have? Like, I think that's a big epistemic blind spot, and I think we just do face that problem realistically as agents. I would like that to be on the table in my view. That seems true to the world.
So it's almost like a requirement to, like, act authentically?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would put it that way.
That raises so many interesting questions, and I know that Caroline has expanded her philosophical inquiry to, like, topics like combat sport. And so we want to get more information on, what Caroline's value theory explanations, how it relates to values in sports, especially values concerning violence. So we'll see you next time with more Caroline.
Thank you.
Thanks for having
watching.
me.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching us.